Very good evening to all of you once again. I'm ever so thankful to have you all joining me in the Bible study of today. We left off in 2 Samuel 14 with the reconciliation of Absalom and David. David has forgiven Absalom for his trespasses against him. And now we are going to be doing 15 and 16 today chapters because very good reason, and we'll get into all of it. I got a lot to go over, so let's just get right into a lot of interesting things to learn from these two. And it came to pass after this, the reconciliation, that Absalom prepared him chariots and horses and 50 men to run before him. Obviously, Absalom didn't want these chariots for war or to go fast. This was just a political move, really. It's to show his royalty because these men going before him, these horses wouldn't be going fast. This was all for show. And Absalom rose up early and stood beside the way of the gate. And it was so that when any man that had a controversy came to the king for judgment, then Absalom came unto him and said, Of what city art thou? And he said, Thy servant is of one of the tribes of Israel. Notice right here, Absalom rose up early, so he would get up really early, and he would go about and try to give advice on people's matters, tell them what they should and shouldn't do. This is the right thing. He's like a politician. He's just getting in good with the people. The thought of him succeeding David is probably very prevalent in his everyday thinking. So he's working on it right now. And Absalom said unto him, See, thy matters are good and right, but there is no man deputed of the king to hear thee. He's telling the people, well, you need somebody over you that actually cares about these matters. Absalom said, not thought, moreover, Oh, that I were made judge in the land, that every man which hath any suit or cause might come unto me, and I would do him justice! Exclamation point. He's very emphatic about this. Just like a politician, he's incredibly emphatic about it. Well, man, if I was the king, and that's what he's trying to say right here. He doesn't want to seem like he's against his father, David. He doesn't want to seem like that. He wants to seem like just the good guy that really has a heart to help people. And it was so that when any man came nigh to him to do him obeisance, he put forth his hand and took him and kissed him. So men would come up to him being the crown prince, the one gonna succeed David, and they're wanting to show him favor early on to get in his good graces, and he's trying to be that messianic figure and say, no, don't bow to me, it's fine. He'd get up and he'd hug them and love them and everything. And on this manner did Absalom to all Israel that came to the king for judgment. So Absalom stole the hearts of the men of Israel. Notice the biblical wording here. He stole their hearts. He's acting like he's wanting to further his father's kingdom and his ideas and his cause, that he's trying to help further this kingdom of David, whenever really he's wanting to make it the kingdom of Absalom. Right here is one of the most controversial of all verses in the entire Bible. And it came to pass after 40 years that Absalom said unto the king, I pray thee, let me go and pay my vow, which I have vowed unto the Lord, in Hebron. Okay, this is the controversial part. And it came to pass after 40 years. For so many diehard scholars, there is no question about this. This simply is another way of saying that Absalom was 40 years old at this time. And so that would have placed, between this verse and the last chapter, that would place probably, in my estimate, about 7 or 8 years of a gap there. So he's been at this political gaining for about 7 or 8 years, is my reckoning. And also, what should be very well noted, now pay close attention to what I'm about to tell you. Absalom being 40 years old right here, this means that David, his reign is coming to an end. This is at the end of David's reign. David is a very old man at this time. He's not very old. He's 70 years old, though. And David reigned for 40 years and 6 months, we're told. This is at his 40-year mark. This is very important for the remainder of the Bible studies that we're going to be doing. From here unto chapter 20, we are talking about the last days of David's life. And chapter 20, verse 22 of Second Samuel 20:22, is actually the final verse of this entire narrative of David's reign. After that, what we're going to see, and I'm going to have to expound on this more as we go into those later chapters, but after chapter 20, we'll be getting into things that happened during the reign of David. Because even in the first two chapters of First Kings, we see how David is still mentioned. And it's just giving more specifics, more details on David's life. I'm going to have to come to all of this later on, but I'm setting you all up for that right now. You have to understand, David only has about another 6 to 9 months at this point as being king, as even being alive. He's about to die. So David's about 70 right here, and Absalom is about 40. But also real quick, notice on the other point of this verse, that Absalom said unto the king, I pray thee, let me go and pay my vow which I have vowed unto the Lord in Hebron. For thy servant vowed a vow while I abode at Geshur in Syria, saying, If the Lord shall bring me again indeed to Jerusalem, then I will serve the Lord. Now this is all a ploy of Absalom. Absalom, he's wanting to take the kingdom. He knows that his father's probably exhibiting some frailties now, and the people notice how Absalom he's waking up early. He's coming to judge the matters of the people. He's already acting like a king. He's been doing it for years now. And David, very frail, not showing himself very much. We'll learn about all that later. But about this matter in Hebron, Absalom wanting to go and offer sacrifices in Hebron. As for that matter, Matthew Henry, he had really good comment on what Absalom has told his father, or requesting of his father. See how willing tender parents are to believe the best concerning their children, but how easy and how wicked is it for children to take advantage of good parents, to deceive them with the show of religion. So many children do this. I can't really get into a whole lot of detail. I can't rant a lot tonight. I have to move on, but this is a very wicked thing. Children do it all the time. They want to hook up with a girl down the road, so they'll tell their parents, their trusting parents, hey, I want to go to church tonight. And instead of going to church, they'll go and meet up with a girl and do all kinds of ungodly things. And the king said unto him, Go in peace. So he arose and went to Hebron. The very last words that King David speaks to Absalom, Go in peace. But Absalom sent spies throughout all the tribes of Israel, saying, As soon as ye hear the sound of the trumpet, then ye shall say, Absalom reigneth in Hebron. And with Absalom went 200 men out of Jerusalem that were called, and they went in their simplicity, and they knew not anything. This was a coup. That's all it was. Absalom, see, there were 3 festivals that every year all of Israel would have to come to Jerusalem for. 3 of them. So during those times, Absalom could make his political moves, and he's had years in order to do this. And no doubt he gained favor with so many of these different families. And Hebron is really one of the more perfect places to do this. This was where David was first made king. And Absalom sent for Ahithophel the Gilonite, David's counselor, the grandfather of Bathsheba, from his city, even from Gilo, while he offered sacrifices, and the conspiracy was strong, for the people increased continually with Absalom. Right here is Gilo, over here is Bethlehem, up here is David, down here is Hebron. This is where Absalom would be. So he's sending for Ahithophel, David's counselor, and once again, Bathsheba's grandfather. He's sending for him. Notice also, before we move along, how Absalom is offering sacrifices at this time. We see politicians doing this all the time. Absalom could not be further from God's heart, and yet he's offering sacrifices. It's a political move. He has to keep up this image. The most evil of politicians among us. They practice Satanism on a daily basis, but whenever it comes time for voting, that's whenever you'll see them at church. Right here. I get a kick out of this one. This is Obama. Right here's his daughters, and right there's Michelle, Michael, whatever her name is whatever. But you see Obama. He's trying. He knows all the eyes are on him. Michelle, she has this look like she would rather be hit in the head with a bat than singing a hymn. It looks bored out of her mind. But worthy of note it is to remember Jesus. He called these people hypocrites. They're like actors. Very much worth noting is what Jesus called the Pharisees back in the day. He likened them to these politicians where they were disingenuous and they were truly like actors. And as a matter of fact, while we're on the subject, as you'll see right here, hypocrite, the word's origin, English, hypocrite, Old French, Latin, then it goes all the way back to the Greek, hypokrates, which is actor. So a hypocrite and an actor are one and the very same. So we can make a connection between Absalom, Barack Obama, and Brad Pitt whenever we're thinking of hypocrites, actors. All they're doing is playing a part in order to get what they want. Which brings me to one last point on this subject matter before we move further. Is on this CNBC article, it states why psychopaths are so good at getting ahead. And the article goes on to say this, and I'm just going to summarize it. If you have ever thought that your charismatic, ambitious, ruthless, and unfeeling boss could be a psychopath, your armchair diagnosis may not be far off. Those who are born with psychopathy can be dangerous. They are also often very successful in ascending to power, like Absalom's doing. We promote them, we elect them, and sometimes a lot of people feel comfortable when people like that are in charge of our lives, says Dr. Igor Galenker. So do I believe that Absalom is psychopathic? One of the commentators actually referred to him as having a reprobate mind. He is so far away from a godly man, a godly man's character, that they believe that he has a reprobate mind. So psychopath is not far at all, if not the perfect description of Absalom. And there came a messenger to David, saying, the hearts of the men of Israel are after Absalom. And David said unto all his servants that were with him at Jerusalem, arise, and let us flee, for we shall not else escape from Absalom. Make speed to depart, lest he overtake us suddenly, and bring evil upon us, and smite the city with the edge of the sword. And the king's servants said unto the king, behold, thy servants are ready to do whatsoever my lord the king shall appoint. So David is getting ready to flee. We actually learn about in the Psalms how David, every time that he backslides, he never writes any Psalms. This right here, he is so close to God that we know of 6 different Psalms that he wrote at the end of his life. And they are Psalm 3, 41, 55, 61, 62, and 63. Psalm 41:9, he actually makes mention of Ahithophel joining up with Absalom. Yea, mine own familiar friend, in whom I trusted, which did eat of my bread, hath lifted up his heel against me. It's also very strange how people will so quickly turn to an ungodly man just because of his outward appearance and those fake things that he's doing. Adam Clark wrote this about this instance where David is he's being pushed off the throne and replaced. Behold, a king, the greatest that ever lived, a profound politician, an able general, a brave soldier, a poet of the most sublime genius and character, a prophet of the most high God, and the deliverer of his country, driven from his dominions by his own son, abandoned by his fickle people. And the king went forth, and all his household after him, and the king left 10 women, which were concubines, to keep the house. Right here we're told about the number of concubines that he had, at least some of them, if not all of them. I would guess all of them. But he leaves behind 10 concubines to keep the house. That also goes to tell us how David, he gave into his passions all the time. What concubines were basically mistresses. They were, I suppose, legal mistresses that one could have back then. And he had almost a dozen of them. That's incredible. Just incredible. And the king went forth, and all the people after him, and tarried in a place that was far off. And all his servants passed on beside him, and all the Kerethites, and all the Pelethites, and all the Gittites, 600 men which came after him from Gath, passed on before the king. These are foreigners, and it's very incredible how his own countrymen are turning against him, and how these foreigners are staying beside of him. They stand with him. They were with him back in Gath before he was king. Now they're thinking that he's being dethroned, and they're still with him. They're more loyal, these Gentiles, than the Jews and the Israelites. Then said the king to Ittai the Gittite, Wherefore goest thou also with us? Return to thy place and abide with the king, for thou art a stranger and also an exile. Notice how David is calling Absalom the king now. David did not view the throne as his own. David viewed the throne as the Lord's. And he did not see it as his place to try to protect it. He didn't have to keep it. He didn't have to dress it. He didn't have to make any kind of great stand that he owned Israel. He knew that the Lord owned the throne of Israel, and he said, if God put me on up there, he can put another on up there and replace me. It's his throne, unto which Jesus will one day reign forever from. But David is telling this Gittite, Ittai, he says, why are you coming with me? Do you not know you can be killed for this? And I really like Ittai's response. Whereas thou camest but yesterday, should I this day make thee go up and down with us, seeing I go whither I may? Return thou and take back thy brethren. Mercy and truth be with thee. David's telling him, look, this just began yesterday, all of this fleeing and everything. He says, you still have time to go back into the city. And Ittai answered the king and said, As the Lord liveth, and as my lord the king liveth surely, in what place my lord the king shall be, whether in death or life, even there also will thy servant be. I don't think that I have to explain it to any Christians how much that sounds like us to our Lord Jesus, because we're saying the same thing. No matter where you go, king, will death or in life will be with you. Just let us come with you. And David said to Ittai, Go and pass over. And Ittai the Gittite passed over, and all his men and all the little ones that were with him. All that means is follow me. And all the country wept with a loud voice, and all the people passed over. The king also himself passed over the brook Kidron, and all the people passed over toward the way of the wilderness. This is actually a shot of where David probably walked. There's 99% chance that is exactly where he walked. And lo, Zadok also and all the Levites were with him, bearing the ark of the covenant of God. And they set down the ark of God, and Abiathar went up until all the people had done passing out of the city. And the king said unto Zadok, Carry back the ark of God into the city. If I shall find favor in the eyes of the Lord, he will bring me again, and show me both it and his habitation. But if he thus say, I have no delight in thee, behold, here am I. Let him do to me as seemeth good unto him. The king said also unto Zadok the priest, Art not thou a seer? Return into the city in peace, and your 2 sons with you, Ahimaaz thy son, and Jonathan the son of Abiathar. So, and see, a seer is a prophet, and he says, you'll do me a whole lot better if you stay inside the city. David needed prophets, spies, seers, whatever. He needed these kind of intelligent people that could gather information, make influential moves on his behalf. It's a very smart move by David. See, I will tarry in the plain of the wilderness until there come word from you to certify me. Zadok therefore and Abiathar carried the ark of God again to Jerusalem, and they tarried there. And David went up by the ascent of Mount Olivet, and wept as he went up, and had his head covered, and he went barefoot, and all the people that was with him covered every man his head, and they went up, weeping as they went up. Notice how before David became king, as a young man, God sent him out into the wilderness. He had to learn. He had lessons that he had to learn now at the end of his life. And I believe there's 2 reasons why God is doing this. One, to humble him as a bit of a payment for that which he has done to Uriah. The sword shall never leave your house. It's part of it. But I also think God knows that David is about to die, and he knows that out in the wilderness is whenever David is the most godly, the closest to him. He is the most in tune with God. So he's sending him out there, and he wants a clean and clear heart from David before his death. I really like Alexander McLaren's comments on this. Coming into the city with his head covered and he's weeping. He says, David is crushed by the consciousness that his punishment is deserved. The bitter fruit of the sin that filled all his later life with darkness, his courage and his buoyancy have left him. He says he's just a fraction of a man at this point. He's so shattered by the punishment of his sin. David would write a very heartbreaking psalm around this time, Psalm 55, verse 4. My heart is sore pained within me, and the terrors of death are fallen upon me. Fearfulness and trembling are come upon me, and horror hath overwhelmed me. And I said, Oh, that I had wings like a dove, for then would I fly away and be at rest. Little did he know that he was just about to be at rest. And like a dove, notice that. I really like that. The Holy Spirit comes down upon Christ like a dove. And here he says that I had wings like that, fly away. And it would surely, the Holy Spirit was inspiring all of this. Very beautiful. Also notice where David is at this time, Mount of Olives. David, it's believed, takes the exact same trek that Christ would take over 1,000 years later whenever he goes from the Lord's Supper to the Garden of Gethsemane, praised unto God. During that time of trial, David is also going up this mount. Right here is the Mount of Olives, one shot of it. Here's another shot of the same area. And right here is just an overall to give you good scope on the general vicinity we're talking about. Here is the Kidron Valley. Okay, so David would have been going down the Kidron Valley, made his way to the Mount of Olives. This is where he is right here. Right here is Mount Moriah, where Abraham was going to sacrifice Isaac. There's so many big spots. Hinnom Valley, we talked about all of these. And one told David, saying, Ahithophel is among the conspirators with Absalom. And David said, O Lord, I pray thee, turn the counsel of Ahithophel into foolishness. Remember this prayer. This is going to be coming up here in just a few minutes. And it came to pass that when David was come to the top of the mount where he worshipped God, behold, Hushai the Archite came to meet him with his coat rent and earth upon his head. Unto whom David said, If thou passest on with me, then thou shalt be a burden unto me. But if thou return to the city, and say unto Absalom, I will be thy servant, O king, as I have been thy father's servant hitherto, so will I now also be thy servant. Then mayest thou for me defeat the counsel of Ahithophel. What he's wanting to do is he's wanting to have another bird in the ear of Absalom. He knows that Ahithophel Ahithophel was really known for giving great advice. He was a man of wisdom. But David prayed that God put bad advice in his heart, which he does. We'll come to that right here in just a second. But now he says to Hushai, you go in and be another voice to Absalom. Give counter advice, bad advice. And hast thou not there with thee Zadok and Abiathar the priest? Therefore it shall be that what things soever thou shalt hear out of the king's house, thou shalt tell it to Zadok and Abiathar the priest. He says, anything, any kind of information that you gain, tell it to the priest, and then they'll get the word to me. They have there with them 2 sons, Ahimaaz Zadok's son, and Jonathan Abiathar's son, and by them ye shall send unto me everything that ye can hear. So Hushai, David's friend, came into the city, and Absalom came into Jerusalem. Chapter 16. And when David was a little past the top of the hill, behold, Ziba, the servant of Mephibosheth, met him with a couple of asses saddled, and upon them 200 loaves of bread, and 100 bunches of raisins, and 100 of summer fruits, and a bottle of wine. Remember Ziba from 2 Samuel 9? Whenever David is inquiring as to whether there's anyone left of the house of Saul or Jonathan, and Ziba is the man that he asked. Well, this is the very same man. And Ziba is showing up, and he's bringing all these goods, and everyone would think, man, that's very nice of him. Well, he's just trying to get in David's good graces so that David falls right into the trap. And the king said unto Ziba, What meanest thou by these? And Ziba said, The asses be for the king's household to ride on, and the bread and summer fruit for the young men to eat, and the wine, that such as be faint in the wilderness may drink. And the king said, And where is thy master's son? And Ziba said unto the king, Behold, he abideth at Jerusalem. He's talking about Mephibosheth, the crippled son of Jonathan. For he said, Today shall the house of Israel restore me the kingdom of my father. A blatant lie. Ziba comes to tell a lie. See, we learn later, not very far from here, 2 Samuel 19, we'll actually be learning the truth of what happened. Mephibosheth wanted to come and see the king, but he was lame. He couldn't walk. So before he could do that, Ziba actually goes and he takes these mules and everything, and he loads them down before Mephibosheth can get to them. And he starts bringing all these things before the king. And apparently there's a dispute between Ziba and Mephibosheth at this time because Saul's land, had been divided between them. And Ziba is wanting Mephibosheth's part of the land. He's tired of working for him, having his servants work for him. So he's just saying, well, I want all of it. So he conspires and he makes up this lie that Mephibosheth is actually wanting Absalom and David to go ahead and destroy one another so that the kingdom can be restored unto Mephibosheth. A blatant lie. Mephibosheth, he doesn't even want the kingdom. He doesn't even want Saul's land, we come to figure out. He loves David. Then said the king to Ziba, Behold, thine are all that pertained unto Mephibosheth. And Ziba said, I humbly beseech thee that I may find grace in thy sight, my lord, O king. Right here, David says, everything that Mephibosheth has then, because he's betrayed me, he says, everything that it's his, it's now yours. And Ziba says, well, thank you, man. Appreciate it, O king. And that's just like satanic people. They try to use tragic circumstances in order to get what they want. We see this with the coronavirus, the pandemic at this time, how they're trying to get mail-in voting. Really, that's the main subject at hand, is the mail-in voting. They're trying to steal the election from Trump. This coronavirus is no more different than other pandemics that have happened. Yet, it's all politics. That's all that it is. And when King David came to Bahurim, behold, thence came out a man of the family of the house of Saul, whose name was Shimei, the son of Gera. He came forth and cursed still as he came, meaning while he was walking, he was cursing David. You could hear him from afar. And this is a descendant of Saul, or of the house of Saul. So here comes Shimei. He's cursing at David, cursing at all of the people with him. And he cast stones at David and at all the servants of King David, and at all the people, and all the mighty men were on his right hand and on his left. So David's surrounded by these soldiers, these mighty men. But Shimei doesn't care. He's kicking him while he's down. And thus said Shimei when he cursed, come out, thou bloody man, and thou man of Belial. The Lord hath returned upon thee all the blood of the house of Saul, in whose stead thou hast reigned. And the Lord hath delivered the kingdom into the hand of Absalom thy son, and behold, thou art taken in thy mischief, because thou art a bloody man. Just one real quick point, very easy point to make. David never wanted to shed the blood of the house. As a matter of fact, he showed nothing but generosity to Saul. He spared Saul's life. He sang for him, songs unto God for him. He fought for him. He did everything for Saul. Even when Saul hated him, David still spared his life. And he loved Jonathan very, very much, and he showed Mephibosheth. David never wanted to harm Saul, so Shimei is completely wrong in his accusations. Then said Abishai the son of Zeruiah unto the king, Why should this dead dog curse my lord the king? Let me go over, I pray thee, and take off his head. Now this is kind of like the co-general of David's army, Abishai. He's the brother of Joab. He's another nephew of David's. Very, very strong man. And the king said, What have I to do with you, ye sons of Zeruiah? Zeruiah is David's sister. So let him curse, because the Lord hath said unto him, Curse David. Who shall then say, Wherefore hast thou done so? He's saying, if God's letting him curse me, let him curse. I believe, whenever reading this, I think that David had spent so many decades, about 4 decades, no one insulting him. And suddenly there's this guy who is just completely, I mean, insulting every which way David. He's cursing at him, you whatever, blankety blank, throwing rocks at him. And I think that this is David saying, I deserve this. Finally, something has come down. And what David says here in just a second is very curious. And David said to Abishai and to all his servants, behold, my son, which came forth of my bowels, seeketh my life. How much more now may this Benjamite do it? Let him alone, and let him curse, for the Lord hath bidden him. He's basically saying, if the Lord is letting Absalom come against me, what little of a matter is it if this Benjamite of Saul comes against me? It may be that the Lord will look on mine affliction, and that the Lord will requite me good for his cursing this day. I like that from David. He says, maybe if I deal with this one minor offense towards me, against me, maybe if I deal with this minor offense in a godly manner, don't respond. And I would say also that David, you got to get tired of the bloodshed. I mean, what, you're going to just have everybody killed? Many kings would have kept, Alexander the Great would have probably cut the man's head off or something, no problem. So many would have. But David says, he's old, he's tired, he just doesn't want to keep going like that. He's just wanting to get away, get to a place of peace. But David says, maybe if I deal with this one minor offense in a godly manner, perhaps the bigger offense will not be placed upon me, which is his own death at the hand of his son. That's what I gather from the verse anyway. And as David and his men went by the way, Shimei went along on the hillside over against him, and cursed as he went, and threw stones at him, and cast dust. And the king and all the people that were with him came weary, and refreshed themselves there. And Absalom and all the people of the men of Israel came to Jerusalem, and Ahithophel with him. And it came to pass, when Hushai the Archite, David's friend, was coming to Absalom, that Hushai said unto Absalom, God save the king, God save the king. Now this is David's spy that he had sent back in, Hushai. And Absalom said to Hushai, is this thy kindness to thy friend? Why wentest thou not with thy friend? He's saying, am I really your friend, Hushai? He said, why didn't you join me outside the gates, and, why'd you stay here? And Hushai said unto Absalom, nay, but whom the Lord and this people and all the men of Israel choose, his will I be, and with him will I abide. And again, whom should I serve? Should I not serve in the presence of his son? As I have served in thy father's presence, so will I be in thy presence. Then said Absalom to Ahithophel, give counsel among you what we shall do. This is Absalom's way of accepting Hushai. He says, well, you and Ahithophel talk. Now what's our next move? I've taken the throne. What should I do now? And Ahithophel said unto Absalom, go in unto thy father's concubines, which he hath left to keep the house, and all Israel shall hear that thou art abhorred of thy father. Then shall the hands of all that are with thee be strong. This was an immoral act. This was also treasonous. And if the people seen Absalom having sexual relations with his father's concubines, then they would know that there was a clear and distinct divide between the two. This would leave the door open for the people to fully support Absalom, instead of having it in the back of their mind that maybe Absalom and David will reconcile once again, and then David will be king, and then he'll punish all the followers of Absalom or something. So this is allowing the people to fully come to the new king. Now, I do not believe that it's any coincidence that it's Bathsheba's grandfather, Ahithophel, and whom gave this advice to Absalom. I do not think it's any coincidence whatsoever, because it's on the very same roof that David seen his granddaughter. It's on the very same roof that it was the start of the slaying of his former son-in-law, and whom he, like I said before in prior studies, whom he probably really liked a lot. Both of them were, him and his son, Eliam. They were both men within the army, probably good friends. He probably still remembered Uriah. He remembered his daughter, and he remembered what David did. And he says, just as what David did now, Absalom, you going out there and do worse to him. This is very sadistic in a way. So they spread Absalom a tent upon the top of the house, and Absalom went in unto his father's concubines in the sight of all Israel. This pornography of that day happening right in the midst of this. It was an orgy, and Absalom is completely. It's amazing to me how Absalom, he's willing to kill his older brother over him raping his sister Tamar. But now Absalom is raping 10 of David's concubines. He's forcing them to have sex. The only alternative is death. And he doesn't appear to have any problem with this. So perhaps it was somewhat of political motives involved at the beginning with this assassination of Amnon. It wasn't solely to take revenge for the rape of Tamar. Perhaps Absalom always desired the throne, and he knew that Amnon, so long as he lived, he would never be king. Well, now we're seeing he doesn't have a problem whatsoever with rape, even of many women of his father's house. And the counsel of Ahithophel, which he counseled in those days, was as if a man had inquired at the oracle of God, and so was all the counsel of Ahithophel, both with David and with Absalom, meaning that they took the words of Ahithophel like directly from God himself. But this was bad advice, and apparently David's prayer triumphed over Ahithophel's wisdom, whatever. David was closer to God than Ahithophel. But that is the study for today. And as I said, we're going to be completing next week. We'll be completing the this narrative being played out, Lord willing, at the end of chapter 20. At the end of chapter 20, we'll finish up this entire narrative, and then we'll see the end of David's reign but God did not want to interrupt this narrative. Therefore, he tacks on an additional few chapters. Chapters 21, 22, 23, 24, and then the first two chapters of 1 Kings. He tacks those 6 chapters on in order to give us details about these days. We are in the very last days of David right now. But that is for today's study. And as I said, I'll explain more of that whenever we come to it. Don't have time right now. Thank you all for joining me. God, a peace be with you. Amen.